Our problem three is what I think is the most interesting question, and it's where we're going for. We're trying to apply this thought process to real world situations, but it tends to be challenging because you don't have this well-defined game on the left, game on the right. So students often don't know where to start. Okay, so where do we start? We always start the same thing. Where our approach, if we can, is we want to figure out a Nash equilibrium is a mutual best response. So we have to figure out what's a strategy and then what's the best response to a strategy. So in this case, your strategy is when are you going to trade and when are you going to not trade? And it should make sense. There's only really one type of strategy. Theoretically, you could have incredibly complex strategies, but only one type of strategy is going to make sense. And that's going to be, I trade if my number is below something and I don't trade otherwise. Like if you have 50, obviously you don't want to trade. And if you have 0, obviously you do want to trade. So a strategy will look something like, I'll trade if my number is below 20. Something like that. I'll trade if my number is below 30, something like that. So strategy is something like, I'll trade if my number is below n. And so we're just going to represent a strategy by this number n when you're willing to trade. So that basic question, what's the best response to strategy n? And maybe it'll be helpful to make this more concrete. So let's pick a specific number. So suppose the person, you knew their strategy was to trade if they had 40 or below. How would you respond to this? So would you trade if your number was 39? I mean, I wouldn't, because the only chance you're going to get a better deal, there's 40 possible numbers they could have, and the only thing that makes you better is 40. So would I trade if my number was 10? Well, definitely. If they were going to trade all their numbers from 1 to 40, then trading with 10, I'm likely to get better. But what you see, everything is split. And so if I knew they were going to trade everything from 40, then what I expect to get is 20. And so the best response to 20, so that's the best response to strategy 40. I'll trade with any number less than or equal to 20. If I have 10, it's a good deal. I've got 30 different numbers that could be better than it, and only 10 that are the same or worse. Whereas if I have number 30, now the odds aren't in my favor. I've got 1 through 30, I'm either the same or worse, and I've got 10 possible numbers that will make me better. And I think I'm off by 1 on these. In one direction, it should be 9 instead of 10 or something like that. But recognize that that's not really what's important. What we're trying to hear is sort of, we're looking for a steady state. And so clearly, 40 is not going to be a mutual best response, because if I thought you were going to trade with 40 below, I would only trade with 20 below. Right? And so in general, the best response to strategy n is going to be strategy n over 2. Plus or minus 1, but that's not really the important part, because we already heard this everything completely unravels. You might think you're being clever and say, well, I'm only going to trade 10 or below. But what's the best response strategy 10? If we played this a bunch and I figured out that's what you're doing, well, pretty quickly, the best response to strategy 10 is I would learn I should only trade if I'm 5 or below. And then you wouldn't do 10, you would do 2.5 or below, 2 or below, and etc. So we get to, one Nash equilibrium. The only time we're going to want to trade is if we each have the number 1. And so here, this is shorthand. We mean I'm only going to trade if my number is 1. Another way is you just don't ever trade. Trades don't benefit for you. But trading when your number is 1 is always the best chance. Maybe the other person makes a mistake. Maybe they don't understand the game. Okay, but this is our Nash equilibrium. I'm only willing to trade if my number is 1. Otherwise, I'm not willing to trade.